Hallo, agus fáilte go trí seascad an programme ag BBC ALBA mi cén spórs na ban. Is me Iona Ballantyne agus ha mi tolige fáilte chuúr in gona cheolachin acin son an SWPL, ha Suzanne Lappin ar as an stiùidio. Ag program na héiche noch son ar cúr an súnt son na season úr, vir me Iona and Suzanne súil ar cútchan na príomh gamichin san rééis son an títal na deireadh. Bruni sin cúteach man na scéalach go móra ar thoiseach ar an season úr, Ba clickad ar an ura go clubicin ura is an thuilleadh éile cúteach. Agus ha Chloe Warrington a géisi mun slí eich go Aubrey Celtic gonna chaidh skippe. Suzanne, welcome back to 360.
Thank you.
You're here right before the season is about to start. There is so much to talk about. We will get to that further on in the show. But first of all, there has been some big news in Kim Little just this week. She has retired from international football. Is that news that you were expecting?
I don't think I was expecting it as such, but you know, having seen the news, I can probably understand maybe why now is the right time for Kim. You know, what a huge loss to the Scotland team, obviously about to embark on the World Cup qualifiers. But you know, knowing Kim, she's probably done it at this time before it all begins. To give the team the best chance to focus on that as they should, without having that maybe midway through if that was already in her thinking. But huge player, 15 years of so much talent for the Scotland national team. Some games pretty much carrying the team on her back. I remember when she first came through as a youngster, what an incredible talent for this country, and she's such a hugely respected player in the game.
Well, that's the thing for Kim, 140 appearances, 59 goals. Like you say, she will be a huge loss, and probably during this transitional period, is she a player that the team would have maybe relied on just to have that figure there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, when I seen it today and I seen she was 31, even that shocked me, because she's just always, I've always just thought she was just such a young, talented player, and one of those players who would play forever almost, because she's that good. But I think, as you say, she's now at that stage in the team where she was, one of the more experienced players, been there, done it, would be helping the young players along the way. But I'm sure, knowing Kim, that she'll still be there at the end of her phone, whether it be for players, coaches, whoever, because she loves the game that much, and I know she loved representing her country as well.
I know it'll be difficult to say because obviously the games haven't taken place yet, but it's a very important time for Scotland with the World Cup qualification coming up. How do you think they'll get on without somebody like Kim, with so much transition, with a new manager in place?
Yeah, undoubtedly it's such a loss. A player of that calibre, isn't going to not be a loss to the team. But I think, particularly in Kim's position, there is strength and depth in there with Caroline Weir, Erin Cuthbert as well, that can, step up and contribute from midfield, whether that be goals, assists and things like that. But she's a huge loss, but it is a transition period. All teams go through it, and it's an opportunity for another young player to grab and take their chance. That's
so true. Like, hopefully a chance to see a kind of more of a new look Scotland. The head coach Pedro Martinez Losa actually said it's time now for the next generation of players to follow in Kim's footsteps and make their own mark with the national team. Do you think we quite have the next generation yet? Are you seeing that in the league elsewhere in other leagues? Are we seeing these players come through yet?
I think, if you look at the squad over the last couple of years, when Shelley was the manager, she was giving people their chances. There is people in and around the Scotland setup with maybe, 5 or 6 caps to their name, which is, good to have. And I think back when I played, there was very little when you looked into, the strength and depth that people had actual experience on the pitch. So it's good that these people have, they've played in big games before as well. And I'm sure they'll see it as an opportunity to go and make their own name for themselves.
All right, well, all the best to Kim.
Yeah.
Sad to see her go from her international career, but I'm sure we'll still be seeing her play with Arsenal.
Yeah, I'm sure.
An tal man nis còitheachadh ar an season mi deireadh agus faradeach títal a bhuanach sa chail. Ha co gamichin ac an gaibh was season cho farpaseach sa bhacin riamh and an SWPL a hin. Suzanne, let's get straight to it. The first game of the new season. Glasgow City 2, Celtic 0. Now, Celtic had previously beaten Glasgow City pre-COVID. That was a bit of a shocker for everyone, wasn't it? So for this first game back, the league then was null and voided. But for this first game back, it was really important for Glasgow City to lay the marker at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as you say, you know, nobody really expected Celtic to beat them previously, you know, and I think for Celtic it would have been such an achievement because they've went so long without beating Glasgow City, but you know, Glasgow City, as they do, you know, came out strong as always, you know, took the game to Celtic at that time, you know, 2 great goals, and you know, Celtic struggled really to make an impact on the game.
Well, that's the thing, we see the goal scorers here. We just saw Rachel McLaughlin with the first one, and Kirsty, how it's just about to come in with the second. 2 players who were with Glasgow City are now with Rangers.
Yeah, and I think that was always, you know, that was coming for City, you know, so that was always in the back of the mind of people watching from afar and maybe thinking, you know, City might start well, but you know, they might lose these players and then it might go downhill a little bit for them from then. But you know, such important players for Glasgow City and such an impact in big games like that. You
can see that Fran Alonso, he wasn't happy at that point. Do you think he was maybe expecting a bit more from his players given the result from the first time round?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I say, it took so long for Celtic to actually beat Glasgow City that they probably went into that game maybe with a different mentality. You know, we've done it before, we can do it again, but you know, when you've upset Glasgow City and the experience they have, and you know, they're not used to losing, so you could tell from early on in that game they were out to rectify that loss the first time round.
It was interesting seeing, just where we were talking about Rachel McLaughlin and Kirsty Howitt, who are now with Rangers, but at that point playing with Glasgow City, they had signed pre-contracts. What would have been going through their mind at the start of the season at this point?
I think as players, you know, every time you step on the pitch you want to give your best, and they are quality players. You know, you could see that for the impact they had on the Glasgow City players, and I know the players themselves, you know, even though they were going to Rangers, they know they relied upon them and they really needed them for the start of the season.
Well, that's a huge match now. Rangers 5, Glasgow City 0. This was the final game before the winter break. A huge result for Rangers, because that was a bit of a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah, a huge shock. You know, I think it made everybody sit up and take note of Rangers. You know, not that anyone was writing them off or anything, but I think to go out and put 5 goals past, you know, the team that have been leading the way in the country for so many years was such a marker to put down. No one expected it, and you know, it was a great result for Rangers.
At this point, do you think people had maybe written Glasgow City off? It's funny saying that now, but at the time it was kind of word was going about that maybe Rangers were in with the top spot, because they did finish that first part of the season top of the table. Yeah, they were really strong. Rangers started the season so strong. You know, Glasgow City lost key players. I think, you know, people would be lying if they said they didn't write them off. I think the majority of people did. You know, a lot of finance put into Rangers, quality players signed, the way they started the season, they just looked as if they were really gelling as a team, and you know, putting goals, not just 5 goals past Glasgow City, but they were putting goals past a lot of teams in the league. And you know, at that point in time it was hard to see how Glasgow City were going to come back. And Kirsty Howitt again on the score sheet, but this time for Rangers, not Glasgow City. Yeah, it's, you know, it's a weird one as an ex-Glasgow City player, but someone, you know, who devoted probably a lot of their life to Glasgow City. I can't, you know, understand how you can go and play against them, but you know, they have, and those girls have obviously went to Rangers in the hope that they take their career further. What would you have put that result down to? Was it the strength at Rangers, or was it due to Glasgow City having lost so many players and actually not being at their best? Because 5-0 is not a scoreline that you'd see from Glasgow City. No, you know, I think you'd have to go back to the 14 in a row run to last see when Glasgow City were beaten 5-0 domestically. It does not happen, you know, and I know it would have been such a sore one for the girls, but I think it's a bit of both. I think it was, you know, Rangers were flying, new signings coming in, gelling well, and as you say, Glasgow City losing 3 of their best players, having lost, you know, Nicola Doherty at the start of the season as well, who was such a regular for Glasgow City over the years. They were in such a transition phase, and you know, success doesn't happen instantly. Well, that's the thing, it was the only game that Glasgow City lost all season. We do move on now to Celtic 0, Glasgow City 3. This was the first game back after the winter break, which was actually extended on till April due to COVID. How, I mean, that we're kind of seeing a new look Glasgow City now with some of their new signings playing, and they looked so much stronger. They did, and even at that, you know, even though
there were new signings. You know, I think a lot of people in this country didn't know a lot about some of them and how effective they could be. So I think even going into that game, you know, I think Celtic were maybe the favourites. You know, Celtic had played strongly in the first half as well of the season, but as you say, Glasgow City came out, you know, all guns blazing. You know, all of the new signings that were on the pitch played their part in the victory that day.
We saw actually setting up the first goal, Nicole Robertson. She was a player kind of earlier on in the season who really stepped up for Glasgow City, but we didn't see much of her towards the latter stages.
Yeah, it was a strange one because, you know, the first time I seen her play, I was really impressed with her, not just, you know, her ability to, you know, make the goalkeeper work and be effective as a striker, but her work rate for the team as well was exceptional. So it was a strange one to see her not feature too much towards the end of the season, but you know, I think that was the thing with Glasgow City. You know, they added players to their team really well. It wasn't just 11 on the park, they had strength on the bench as well. Do
you think people had maybe written Celtic off at this point? Because, I mean, up until then, they'd only lost to Glasgow City and they had a 2-2 draw with Forth for Farmington, again, which was a bit of a shock. But at this point, people were maybe thinking, right, Glasgow City are back in it. Rangers have been playing really well. It must be between Glasgow City and Rangers. Yeah, I think that was the view then. It was a two-horse race, and you know, I think if Glasgow City have beat you twice, you know, it's hard to see how you'll then come back round and have a chance with winning the league. But you know, maybe, you know, in effect that had a beneficial effect on Celtic. You know, maybe the pressure was off a bit more. You know, they weren't up there in the two-horse race, but you know, we've seen them come back strong towards the end of the season. Now we move on to Celtic 1, Rangers 0. This was a huge result for Celtic and probably one that people weren't expecting, even on the night, given the standard that Rangers were playing that evening.
Yeah, I think so. You know, such a huge game for both sets of players to be playing, you know, at Celtic Park. And you know, again, as you say, before the game, I think everybody had Rangers as the favourites, and they were probably the better team in the night, but you know, Celtic's resilience got them the result in the end.
Well, really upsetting for Kirsty Howat in that match. That was when she was injured. That was a huge loss for Rangers, and probably one. Do you think that would have been something that did go on to affect them?
Yeah,
for the end of the season?
100%. You know, every time I watched Rangers last season, you know, from this point onwards, I always thought they struggled to have a real goal threat, and that's what Kirsty Howat gave them, you know, and to lose her after, you know, just really signing her and looking to get the best out of her. You know, probably the whole game plan was set up to get the best out of Kirsty Howat, and to lose her was such a shame, just for the club, but for her personally as well.
How frustrated will Rangers have been with this result at that point, especially given they could have scored multiple times on the night?
Yeah, they should have had the game wrapped up, you know, and that is the thing though. You know, the longer the game goes on and you've not taken your chances, you know, the longer the game did go on, you started to think, you know what, this could go Celtic's way, and you know, credit to them, they hung in there, and you know, a result that meant so much to them, as you could see from the celebrations, you know, at Celtic Park. You know, they were such together on the night as a team, and you know, they dug in. They probably themselves knew they were the underdogs in that game, and such a massive result that put them right back in the frame for the title.
You can see just how delighted Fran Alonso is. He doesn't hide his emotion when either way, whatever he's feeling, and you know just how much that means to Celtic.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, you know, I don't know him personally, but I think how he is as a character ripples through the team. You know, they work for him, you can see it. You know, he's up and down the touchline, you know, positive, encouraging, and the players responded to it in the second half of the season. There was no doubt about that.
And a young player who actually set up Mariah Lee, we will talk about further on in the show, Chloe Warrington. She's a player this season who people have been talking about because she has stepped up in these big games and has been playing really well. Yeah,
and I think on that game in particular, you know, Brogan Hay was such a threat going into the game for Rangers, and you know, I think Chloe really handled her well and was one of the reasons why Celtic came out on top on the night.
Well, then we move on to the final game of the season. It did go down to the wire. It was between results going Glasgow City's way and goal difference. The pressure was on in this match, wasn't it? Yeah, the pressure was on massively for Glasgow City. Not a position they've maybe found themselves in domestically before, you know, going to the last game in such a high pressured game, but they have faced pressured games in the past. You know, they've got the experience of how to deal with that, and to be honest,
it was textbook how they controlled that game on the day. You know, it was never in doubt that they were actually going to win the game and win the title.
Well, the thing is, for Celtic to have won the title that day, Glasgow City would have had to lost to Rangers, but also Celtic had to win on a certain goal difference, which they did. They scored 8 against Motherwell, so they did the job on that side. They put everything into it. But Glasgow City, again, you can't write them off.
Yeah, they are. You know, there's a reason why they've been champions 14 times in a row. You know, they know how to get it over the line. And you know, we were speaking earlier about how good Rangers started the season and they were flying and gelling well. But you know, the sign of champions is actually the other end of the season. It's when it gets tough. It's when the pressure comes. It's when the games are thick and fast midweek, weekend. And you know, Glasgow City really came through that period really well. And you know, credit to Celtic as well. I think they deservedly finished runners-up, if I'm honest, because I think the way that they attacked the second half of the season was fantastic from, you know, where they came in the first half.
Could you have predicted how the table finished at the top of the table anyway?
I don't think so. You know, I think I'm never shy in saying, you know, I think from the finance that was put into Rangers, you know, to finish third is, in my view, is a disappointment for them. But for Glasgow City, you know, I think the inner belief they have, no one in-house at Glasgow City would ever have felt what maybe people on the outside thought, that, you know, their dominance was over, and it probably made them stronger, more resilient and more determined to get it over the line. And you know, I've been part of their title winning teams before, but I know, having spoken to some of them, that was probably the sweetest one yet. You know, when people write you off and have people coming and taking that title off you, you could see on their faces how much it meant to them.
And you can see even with some of their new signings who came in for the second half of the season, Odifulu Tudulu, Priscilla Chinchilla, 2 players who have settled into Glasgow City so well.
Oh, yeah.
And play in the style that Glasgow City are known for. Yeah,
such huge players towards the end of the season. You know, I think they get player of the game on a number of instances, and you could see, as you say, they fitted into the Glasgow City style very well, but also the attitude they had as well, and the work ethic is exactly what you want as a Glasgow City player.
Brilliant. Well, what a season that was. And very good to look back on it. But we do have the new season coming up, so we'll talk about that shortly.
No worries.
A Chloe Warrington ar bhí Celtic bhó clasa 3 sa bhún scóil agus hair stiùidio suas gan chéad scipe. A sé season scanneal hair dúis ein leis a chéad chunan professionta éiche. Chabúrin cúsin a bhína beargaí mar hair bhí géise dó tríseascad.
I definitely didn't expect to make the amount of appearances that I did, and especially in the big games like the Glasgow City, Rangers, Hibs, getting to start those games, and like the one at Celtic Park, I never expected to just walk onto that field and play.
A séu ainisteach an a chéadskipa ag Celtic an t-seusan. Tron staure chud Chloe Warrington a hánig Tron an Academy, eniam the cúnat Colleadeise club.
I was delighted because obviously I'd worked for it for the previous year. I was only on an amateur contract, so I was absolutely delighted to sign the pro contract. I actually got scouted when I was in primary 3 one of the coaches was in our school, in my primary school, and I've been at Celtic now 10 years, so I've not left, not went to another club, not come back, been there right through the academy. I came through with like David Haley and things like that, so I've been at the academy and then just progressed into the first team. I aspired to play professional football, so when I was coming through the academy, you know your expectations of the squad, and you always used to see the women's squad. Sometimes you'd be on half a pitch up at Lennoxtown and you'd see them training, and you always wanted to be there. Like, that's what I was in the academy team for, and that's exactly why I played football, because I did want to sign that professional contract and be one of those girls in that team. We're in 6 days a week, including our game days, so we're in the gym and we're on the pitch and we're with each other for a good 5-6 hours a day. So when that grows bond within the team as well, but we are training a lot more and spending breakfast and lunch with each other. I mean, it's a good laugh. I'm a Celtic fan, so it makes it a lot more enjoyable when we're in every day and we get to go in the stadium and have a lunch and things like that. That's a wee girl's dream coming true, so it was my dream, and thankfully I've managed to achieve that.
Glach an chluicheadrách an chorm tréni sa bhinat coladh sa chiad nu the Hannick manager, Fran Alonso, isteach an agriach.
David Taylor, who's the assistant now with Fran, he was my coach and he gave me the opportunity to go and train with the first team, and it was a clean slate for everybody when Fran came in, so I just managed to work hard and put myself out there for Fran to notice me, especially when everybody was on a clean slate and there was nobody who knew Fran better than any of the other girls. I can remember my first training session. It was in Lennoxtown, and Fran came in, he had a meeting, and then we all went out to the pitch, so it was a wee bit nerve-wracking. But I think as soon as I got on that pitch, the nerves went, and I just managed to play football just quite confidently and things. I was happy, so when you're happy it makes things a lot easier. I did work hard as soon as I got there. I didn't want to feel like I was an academy player and I was going to look like an academy player. I wanted to look like and fit in with the girls that were there, so it came with hard work and the things that Fran's taught us and things like that. I've enjoyed every minute of it so far. The defence that we've got, the group of girls, they're all quite close knitted, and Jodie and Craigie have taught me a lot during my time, and I look up to the girls like that. Like, they've played at high levels and they've pulled me through sometimes, and vice versa. I mean, I might be younger, but I like to support the girls as well, especially with Craigie, Kelly and Jodie and Caitlin. They do help me a lot, but vice versa, I like to help them. I think every single one of us would put our body on the line last season, especially in some of the games, especially like Rangers, and we could have been defending for 90 minutes, but if the girls at the back never done what they've done, we wouldn't be able to score those goals up top either. And Caitlin Hayes, she'll put her head on absolutely everything. Honestly, it's like a brick wall, so we all fight for each other and we all trust each other that we'll put our body on the line. And as the back five, including the goalkeeper, every single one of us have got trust in each other to go and do that.
Le pandemic is figure imach Glasgow slúi agus a thuilleadh COVID-19 son kit cluiche ein. Tá buring season as anasíche via Chloe, so he bliana gus a league.
I think I'm looking forward to just getting a season underway and hopefully it being a season, touch wood, without any stop-start. So I'm just looking forward to it being hopefully a normal season, and having the cups back is always more exciting as well, because that's more silverware that you can go for. More appearances. I mean, I'm a full-back, so it's not very many. I don't score very many goals, but potentially get on the score sheet there, here or there. And as a full-back, you don't want to concede any goals, and none of the defence do. So I do have goals and expectations of myself that I'd like to achieve. So hopefully I can make sure by the end of the season that I've achieved them and have a successful season. I mean, I always put pressure on myself to perform, and I don't take it any differently from being on an amateur contract to being on a professional contract. I'll always work hard, and I'll always put myself out there to be selected for the starting 11. I mean, whether I was amateur or professional, I just like to go out and play with football, and it's a status that's put on you, and you do have high expectations, but when you work hard and you're dedicated, then it just comes natural to you.
Suzanne, Chloe Warrington is a player who we briefly touched on in the previous chat. She's somebody who really stepped up when it mattered.
She was. I was impressed with her every time I seen her last season, particularly in the big games for Celtic. She was not just great defensively, but she's great as a fullback going up and supporting the attack as well. And she's someone who looks like she gives her all every time she steps on the pitch, and I think she'll be a huge asset to the Celtic team going forward. And
really good to see an academy player coming through the ranks, playing with the first team. That is what academies are there for, and she is a prime example of that. Yeah, it is, and to see something like that happen at Celtic, I think I told you the last time that I wrote to Celtic as a young girl when they had no women's teams, no girls teams, and to see something like that now is just amazing, and should have happened a long time ago. But Chloe's proof that
things like that do work when they're you know, the resources and the time and the coaches and dedication is put towards it.
Well, that's the thing, because for Chloe being primary 3 and then suddenly she's playing at Celtic Park, that she's living the dream, and winning at Celtic Park too.
Yeah, no, it's huge, you know, as a fan of any club, to be able to go and step on that pitch and represent the team you love and as you say, to win, you know, and that would have been in the back of a lot of the players who were fans that night. You know, you don't want to not win when you're playing on that pitch. And you know, I think she touched on it. She's just, you know, she's wanting to do well, she's wanting to improve. She knows she's, you know, still got years ahead of her to learn in the game. But you know, talking about what we were talking about earlier with Scotland, I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if she's someone who, you know, features as part of that transition period. She
is a good one to keep an eye on, and that's the thing with Fran as well. He's very comfortable and happy, or so he says he is, giving these younger players a chance, and we saw that last season, and I'm sure we'll see it this season too, because there's been big change at Celtic. Sarah Ewens and Lisa Robertson moving down south to Birmingham City. That is a really big loss.
It is a huge loss for Celtic. You know, Sarah Ewens with her goals, but for me, Lisa Robertson, you know, was probably the standout for Celtic all of last season.
And player of the season.
Player of the season, rightly so, getting involved in the Scotland team. She's a player that I know well. She played at Glasgow City for a couple of years when I was there, and you know, listens and learns, and now she's at the stage in her career where she can really bring those around her into the game and motivate them. And she was such a driving force behind, you know, Celtic's second half of the season last year, and you know, it will be difficult to replace that in the centre of midfield.
Is Birmingham City the right place for them to be, do you think?
You know, I think any player getting that opportunity to go and play down south and, you know, test yourself, you know, I've done it in the past, it is, you know, it can be a step up as well, and you know, out your comfort zone. Scotland's all they've ever known in terms of playing domestically, and you know, I'm sure knowing Lisa and Sarah, you know, they'll give it their all, and you know, Birmingham will give them that opportunity to do so.
Well, they'll be very familiar with the head coach, Scott Booth, who has now left Glasgow City. Again, that's a really big change for Glasgow City, because he's been at the helm during these really successful years. How do you think they'll get on even during the first half of the season without Scott? They do have Grant Scott in on an interim basis, and he has said previously that he hasn't changed too much. It's the same style of play, similar coaching. What do you think? How do you think they'll get on? I think, you know, Grant was there for a while alongside Scott, and I think what Glasgow City have done well is they've got Leanne Ross now on the coaching side. You know, she's been there for all of the 14-year title wins. You know, she knows the style of play, she knows what it takes to be successful, and I think, you know, as Grant touched on, he won't try and change it too much because it is a winning formula at the moment, and you know, it'll be interesting to see how Grant and Leanne do, you know, because I know Leanne will be determined to be successful in her first, you know, sort of assistant manager role. Well, another Leanne who was at Glasgow City, now with Motherwell, Leanne Crichton, she has got a big job on her hands too with Motherwell, assistant to Paul Brownlee, even just getting Motherwell back up, I don't want to say back up and running, but just in a good position in SWPL 1, that's going to be quite a big job. Yeah, I think it'll be a huge job, but I think, you know, there's no better person for it than Paul and Leanne Crichton. You know, I know Leanne really well. She's another one who's a winner, doesn't want to lose. You know, she's got such a good, you know, attitude on the pitch, but her attitude and how she lives her life away from it as well, you know, has always been, you know, the sort of model professional. And I think just to have that in and around the Motherwell environment will help the girls see, you know, what can be achieved when, you know, you put everything into place that's required to be successful. It's funny because last season, especially at the start of the season, twice, the one that was null and voided, and then when it started again, there was so much chat about how competitive it was going to be, how it was so exciting, but it almost feels like this season coming up even more so, because there again has been so much change, so many more people are watching now too. Yeah. And that's all I think anyone's ever wanted for the women's game here is, you know, the spotlight to be on them, more people watching, and to deliver a product that is exciting for fans to go and see. And I think, as you touched on, there's been so many moving parts now, you know, change of coaches at Glasgow City, big players moving on from Celtic, new players coming in we don't know so well,
Rangers, you know, they've strengthened again with the likes of Jane Ross, who has a proven goal-scoring record in this country before, having done it so many years for Glasgow City. I think Rangers, you know, will make no hiding of the fact that they want to win the league this year. So, yeah, and then we've got the newer teams coming in as well, who, you know, will be looking to make a good account of themselves. So I think, yeah, it really makes for interesting viewing. And
there will be more pressure at the bottom of the table too, given there will be relegation again this season. Teams were clear of it last season. Yeah, I think so. I think if you are in and around that, but it's exciting as well, you know, that from that end, those games as well, when you get to the latter half of the season, are exciting. But again, it gives players something to play for. I think every time you step on the pitch, whether you be at the top of the table or at the other end of the table, you know, something's on the line, you know, that makes it that little bit more exciting. Even if we look at the Edinburgh Derby, we had Hibernian, who had it was a difficult season last season. They look to be back on track now. Some of the results from the SWPL Cup would prove that. Do you think this will be a better season for them coming up? I hope so. It's weird because they were always Glasgow City's biggest rivals, but you know, it's been kind of sad to see them fall away the way they did last season, because again, for me, although, you know, they've been second in command to Glasgow City for a number of years, they've also helped drive the women's game on so much, you know, and for me, it would be good to see them, you know, back up there, back challenging where, you know, in my eyes, they should be. And Hearts are another team you'd like to see more confidence from them this season, because I know last season was hard, conceding a lot of goals, especially for some of the teams at the bottom of the table. It's never easy to go into those bigger games, especially, but under a new head coach, you now hope things might be a bit better for them. Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, it's always tough when you come into a league and, you know, you face a couple of really bad results, but, you know, they've got that out of the way now. They've dusted themselves down. They would look back at, you know, how can they be a bit more clever in games. You know, it's about that when you're playing against opposition who you know maybe are of better quality than you, but how can you, you know, stay in the game as long as you can. And yeah, they'll be looking to improve on how they done last year. And I'll come back to your answer in a few months' time and then a few months' time after this, but who do you think will take the top spot and the Champions League spot? Can you predict? You're asking me to go with my heart and my head. My heart's always going to say Glasgow City, but you know, I say that a lot of times last season. You know, for me, the strongest team in paper are Rangers. Yeah. You know, and they really do have to deliver this year. So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, particularly with the likes of Jane Ross, who, you know, won't miss some of the chances that were missed last season for Rangers. I think that was their downfall at times. So, yeah, I would probably say I think Rangers might edge it. Do you think Rangers champions, Glasgow City second spot? Yeah. Right. We'll come back to this. We'll reassess it. We'll reassess at Christmas and then again towards the end of the season. That's if anybody's still talking to me at Glasgow City. We'll just get that bit out. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us this week, and thank you for previewing the season, looking back at last season. It's exciting. And we'll see how we get on. Cool. Well, sin air son in noch, mus falf sin hasin dochus gun Glasgow City gomas and darna gemachke in a servets and Champions League. Cynnych hwg yn ffaich sydd yn gem bio BBC ALBA. Jan cynsioch gyfel sydd yn t-seachdain YouTube, agos geib sydd yn program deireadh BBC iPlayer. Hysyn sydd yn ach iachgain.